Hello everyone! Welcome back to the Obituary Stories. So, there's been something on my mind recently. Yeah.
What is it?
So burnout and mental health in general. Yeah.
Have you experienced it before?
Definitely. I think it happened a couple of years back when I was at the peak of my career actually as a teacher. And I didn't even know that I was burnt out until it showed on my body. So I never had eczema before lah. But at that point in time, I had it on my arms, on my legs, on my neck, and it even went up to my face. And that was when a student actually asked what was happening to me. He was saying, "Miss Go, what happened to you?" And that was when I realized that I needed to do something about it. I thought like going to the skin center was not going to be a sustainable option because I obviously have to wait for appointments, and it wasn't helping because all the creams that they gave me did not help. And so I felt like it was a psychological issue, and I realized that I couldn't handle it. And so I did the most coward thing ever by leaving the teaching service. Because I felt like I needed to tend and take care of myself first before I can take care of my students.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I did not know I was burnt out until I left the teaching service and realized that my eczema subsided as well after that.
Wow. I'm glad to hear that.
It almost felt like a miracle. It felt like my body was telling me to stop doing whatever I was doing at that point in time and to recuperate. Yeah. How was it like for you?
Oh, that was such an experience for you. I'm sure you must have been stressed out so much that your body reacts to the burnout as well. I think for me, it was, a time in my life. There was once I actually had a panic attack. I really had too many deadlines on my plate. And I had 3 important tasks. Number 1, I was teaching a girl and she was going to take her PSLE that year. So imagine the amount of stress I had placed on myself to make sure that she was going to do really well. Okay, so that was one of the tasks I had to fulfill. Number 2, I had an assignment to hand in for this law lecturer. She was very strict in my school and nobody wanted to fail on her assignments. It was very tough. I had to submit the deadline was like 1 week's time, and I was going through a lot of responsibilities. I had a lot of things on my plate. Number 3, I was also juggling another part-time job. So I had 3 major things to deal with, and that gave me actually panic attack. So I was lying on the bed in my student's house and I was trembling, and I was like thinking to myself, oh no, I think I'm doing too much, because my hands were shaking during the lesson, and I was like, what's going on? My fingers are moving like this, and I was like, what is happening to me? And then later on, I was rushed to the hospital, and the doctors there explained, after a 3-hour wait in the emergency room, emergency rooms take forever, but it's okay, I understand why. The triage is necessary. Later on, the doctor explained that there's nothing really wrong with me. And then I said, what? And then he said, you're just breathing shallowly. And I was like, oh, so that is what's happening. When you breathe shallow, actually, you're not taking in enough oxygen. And your brain sort of goes into this like shock mode where you have to take in as much as you can and just to keep your brain functioning. And so you're trembling because there's like not enough oxygen circulating. And back then I didn't know about mindfulness. I didn't know about deep breathing. I did not know about all these techniques to cope with the stress that I was going through at that point.
Yeah. So it felt like you were, because you mentioned that you had a panic attack. So was it due to anxiety? Like you were very anxious about having to juggle all these things, but yet at the same time you were trying to seek perfection because you thought that you could do it all, but things didn't work out that way.
Yes, it was a very stressful period, and I can tell you truth, it was something that I would not wish on anybody, because I really didn't know what was going on with my body. It was just something that just happened out of the blue. My hands trembled, and it was so hard to write and think at the same time, because I was trying to explain some concepts, but in my head, at the back of my head, I was panicking, and I was thinking about all the deadlines that was coming up. And stress really affects the body So like for some of us, maybe it's hives. Maybe like for you, it's eczema. For me, it could be a panic attack. For someone else, it could be burnout and misery.
Yeah, because I feel like after all these episodes with burnout, I felt like I've learned to trust my body a lot more. When I don't feel well, or when my heart starts to beat for some strange reason, or like I feel like a bit like my stomach's giving me a bit of like queasy feeling, not even butterflies, but queasy feeling. I've learned to listen to my body a lot more ever since this whole episode of burnout. Yeah, so that's the thing. The funny thing is I've also asked myself what actually led to the burnout. Was it because I was striving for perfection? Was it because I had such great expectations of myself to perform and even to overperform, just so that I'll be able to tell my students that, I've done my best for you? I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to be the best for my students, but that backfired, and that led me to
suffer a lot.
Correct. But I also felt like, was it self-imposed, or was it because the system has put so much pressure on teachers to perform and to do their utmost best for their students at the expense of themselves, or what? So sometimes I ask myself, is it I feel like it's because I have this tendency to want to strive for perfection in many, many things that I do, but I've also learned to let go ever since that incident, because I feel like there are a lot of things I can't control, and I shouldn't be controlling, because let's put it this way, life is also quite unpredictable. There are a lot of things that we want to control, but life doesn't seem to happen that way lah. So that's what I've gained out of this burnout experience. So now I don't even want to experience burnout. So whenever I feel like I am kind of burning out, I will take myself out of that whole situation, go for a break if I need to, do something that's not related to work.
Yeah. So that's how you cope with burnout. So you take a step out and say, okay, I need a breather. I need to think about this and reflect on it.
Yeah.
I think some coping strategies for me would be mindfulness breathing. And this is something that a lot of therapists will teach their clients to do, which is just to breathe. In fact, I had one lecturer in school, and he gave us this one rule in class. Guess what?
Breathe.
Yes, exactly. And that was the best rule in class ever. It made so much sense to me because, we in this hectic world, we are just chaotically, mindlessly going through our tasks, right? We're just rushing from point A to point B, maybe to pick up our kids, and then to cook dinner, and then to prepare this and that for the next day's work. It's just so stressful, and given the demands of our job, we have to be like perfect in every way. It's not healthy on our minds that we have to look good for everything. We want to look as immaculate as possible, but at the same time we have to allow ourselves to breathe. And this is one rule that I cherish so much, even till today. I tell all my students, when I sense that they are shallow breathing, to breathe. And if I had taken 3 deep breaths on the day I had that panic attack, I would have easily avoided a hospital. I could have easily avoided that trembling, because when you allow oxygen to come in, your body will feel very much more at peace with itself. It doesn't fight itself to stay alive. I'm not struggling for oxygen in that sense when I shallow breathe.
Remember, like in our last podcast, we were talking about how many of us are actually very, very anxious individuals.
Yes.
And so I feel like, I wonder if we have grown more anxious because of how competitive our society has become, and that we always feel like we need to plan ahead, make sure that we schedule things in advance so that we can accommodate for any last minute changes and things like that. I feel like I'm an over planner myself. Okay, I've learned to be less of it, but I feel like, but every single time I try to plan things, I always want to plan for contingencies.
Yeah.
And it's all the what ifs.
Yeah, I think that's why we have, plan A to plan Z, maybe. And what if it rains today? We can't do this, we can't do that. We have to back up. Because we don't want to let somebody down or something like that. We have to make different contingency plans. But then again, we can only do so much, and certain things are out of our control. And sometimes over the years as an educator, I've taught myself to let it go. So let it go if certain things don't happen my way, and I will embrace what comes next. I will learn to teach myself that. And even going through a difficult period like not getting that A for that teacher, for that assignment, for that lecturer, I just learned to let it be and just accept that, okay, maybe I failed this time round, but the next time round, I'm not going to fail. I'm going to improve on that. I'm going to figure out what I can do next so that I will not let myself down and let my teacher down. So this is where the growth mindset kicks in. And this is what I've learned to embrace my whole life. Rather than having like this perfectionist mindset, I have to be perfect in everything. I have to be number one in everything. I learned to breathe, allow myself some time to rest. And then once I'm rested enough, I feel confident to come back to the task again. I will do it again.
Yeah.
And then I have more energy this time around to give and feed my students, because I think as educators we give a lot of ourselves.
Yeah. And I feel like if we don't take care of ourselves, I think it's very difficult for us to take care of the people around us, and it's the people around us who will suffer the most when we burn out. So
Yep.
I just hope that I do not even come back to that stage of life where I have to deal with eczema again. I mean, I still have eczema flares every now and then, and I realize that whenever I start itching or when I start scratching, that's when I know I need to take my mind off work already. And I know I can't like escape from work, right? It's like how Singaporeans we like to travel and we like to leave the country to escape from work. It's not that kind of escape. I'm talking about the kind where I just
Need a break.
need like a mental health break for that day.
Mental health.
Like go on leave, do whatever I want to do except for work. Yeah, in fact, I don't even know why mental health is not even considered a case for medical leave. And speaking about medical leave, right, when I was back in secondary school and I was teaching, I always felt very guilty taking leave. Because I don't have an official reason, I don't have a medical reason to take leave. I just am tired. Can't I just sleep at home and like just rest at home? But the thing is, that
excuse that we have to give is something that is not medically related to our minds,
Correct.
but it's something to do that's physically related, which is not exactly why we took the leave in the first place.
But I realised what actually stopped me from taking leave is the fact that I have to ask people to take over my lessons as relief. And I'm like, I don't want to trouble my colleagues, for like taking over my class just because I want to go on leave to take care of my mental health. But at that time, mental health wasn't even talked about when I was a teacher. And I felt like at that point in time, burnout didn't even exist. Like we didn't even have a word to describe what burnout was, or self-care even. But I know that it's becoming more important for educators to practice self-care now and to be talking about burnout and mental health, like finding a counselor, talk about finding a therapist even. And I hope that it's becoming less of a taboo topic.
Yeah, it is. Actually, among the Gen Zs and Gen Alphas and millennials even, I think therapy is something that we would embrace. Our parents, our more senior folks, I'm not sure about them. Not all of them are open to it, but to me, I think it's one of the must-haves. Because without a therapist, without someone to go through your thoughts with you and to help you articulate them and to help you process, it's very difficult to go through life, especially when you have so much on your plate, so many expectations to meet. And the burnout is real, and every educator who's sacrificing their lives for kids, you are a giver, you are someone who has to constantly produce. And if you can't give from an empty cup, so you have to fill yourself up first with help before you help others. It's the same thing like putting on an oxygen mask on a plane. They don't tell you to put on the mask on others first, right? They tell you to put it on yourself first, so that you can be fed and equipped to give to others. And that is the logical flow that should be the way. But when you are always forcing yourself to give out of an empty cup, it feels very hard to take medical leave and go on breaks, and you feel guilty actually going on these breaks, and you don't want to pass on the responsibility to another teacher because that friend or that colleague has to cover for you. And it's also in a way, you put a lot of shame on yourself, and that adds to the mental burden. So it is quite a vicious cycle, I would say. And I think if they allow us to have a specific reason, just accept, every company, every institution allows for mental health breaks.
Mental health leave even, like make it instead of medical leave, so you could medical/mental health leave.
Yeah.
But of course, we have to be mindful of the number of leaves. Okay, you see, back to the whole point about social responsibility, right? We need to be mindful of the number of leaves that we take, because we know of people who take leave like nobody's business. But what I'm saying is that leave needs to be taken responsibly, but for official reasons like mental health should really be considered, and I really hope that some sort of our leave policies might change in the future.
I think what would be helpful, Q-ting, is actually if, let's say, we can prove to our companies that, let's say, we are going on a mental health leave and we are going to see the therapist. So the therapist will be accountable and say, yeah, this employee came to see me, and there is a valid reason for her to take this mental health leave.
But the thing
So
is,
there's
you
some
don't.
accountability there.
Yeah, but you don't actually need to see a therapist, because you sometimes you just want time on your own alone
Yeah,
to
true.
tend to your mental health. So in that case, there's no reason or like a slip of paper to show that you actually saw a therapist.
Like, who is going to prove that you really need a mental break? Only you yourself know it.
Yeah, so I just feel like there's more trust. Like, I hope that there is a lot more trust in teachers to declare that they need the mental health, and I just feel like it's really important, because I don't want to lie about taking leave,
Yeah.
right? No one wants to lie about taking leave or
Yeah.
giving excuses about that leave, because I feel like the moment we lie, we're trying to hide
Hide
the
something.
more important things that we should be talking more about it more in our lives.
Yeah, and of course you don't want to share them with your colleagues or your supervisors, because it's kind of not suitable and not appropriate for work. So only someone who knows you well, like a close friend or someone who really knows you need that mental health break, can vouch for these things for you. And if, let's say, you really need a mental health break, how easy is it to go to your supervisor and say, hey,
I need to tend to my mental health today. I need to go on leave.
yeah. How is it? Because not everyone is open, and some employers expect you to, work harder to meet the KPI, to meet the goals and things like that. It's very stressful, actually. Yeah, because we are humans too. So unless you have a robot standing in front of you to cover for you, no employer is going to be happy about it, usually.
Yeah.
So if all employers are receptive to the idea of having mental health breaks, then employees will be happy working, and I think that will be a good way to create a happier working environment.
Yeah. So with this, we hope that you have enjoyed this conversation with us.
Yep.
See you at the next one.
See you.